Welcome to Connect, Curate, Create, where we're on a journey through the arts and creative industries. I'm your host, Dr. Tim Butcher. If you're anything like me, you love learning about art and creativity. In each episode, I ask artists and creatives how they navigate life, work, and more besides. They generously share their stories and offer invaluable insights that you and I can put into action. As the author of Creative Work Beyond Precarity, I blend my mission to give artists a fair go with my academic smarts, to ask the questions that draw out lessons we can all learn from.
And it's just a lot of fun. It's messy and it's dirty and it's very hands-on and wheel throwing, for instance, is very meditative. And it's a very calm and kind of collecting process where the world kind of melts away when you do it. And that's this beautiful community that I've seen kind of form over the last 3 years or so. And those potters are now creating their own little studios at home and installing kilns, and they've started going to the markets and stuff around town. And it's been great just to see them to teach them for the first time 3 years ago when they'd never touched clay, and now see them kind of creating their own little studios 3 or 4 years later. But it's that whole thing. You have to create work that puts bread on the table and create work that makes your soul sing kind of thing. So it's creating both. And ceramics is really great for that.
In this episode, I talk with Travis Bell, an artist-ceramicist based in Launceston, Tasmania. Travis shares deep insights into his creative process and the community that surrounds it. He beautifully illustrates his meditative pursuit of precision through touch and feel, how there can be two aspects to ceramics in making both sculptural and functional work, and how a local community is growing through experiential learning and knowledge sharing. Be sure to also check out the show notes for highlights and links that you can use to shape your own journey. If you learned something from this episode, follow us on your favourite podcast app and tell your friends about Connect, Curate, Create. Welcome back to the podcast. We are here on a sunny day in Lonning. It's a beautiful space here at Enterprise Tasmania again. And so we're with a local artist, ceramicist, Travis Bell. Travis, thanks for coming over to Enterprise.
No, thank you for having me. I'm a tad bit nervous, but I'm sure it'll go great.
No, it's great. Look, I wouldn't have invited you if I wasn't absolutely fascinated with your practice. We've only met a few times, but I was telling you before, like the first time I walked into the studio at the uni, into the ceramic studio, and you were there, and you had some of your work, and I was just captivated by your work. And it's a practice that I know very little about. I did a pottery class at school, and that was the class that all the naughty boys did. And, the school that I went to. So I want to move away from that perception, my own perception of that, and get to, okay, what's the artistic practice beneath that? So perhaps if we could go back further than what I've just done to where it all began for you.
Yeah, sure thing. And I don't want to reinforce that naughty boy aspect to pottery, but pottery in high school for me, I would throw it onto the roof. I'll throw balls of clay onto the roof because I know that it would dry during the day, and then on the classes in the afternoon, it would then kind of rain down. So anyway, but no, I always did art at school, but drawing was my main thing. So all throughout primary school and high school, I did all the art subjects. And all of my books would be covered in illustrations and cartoons and everything. And my teachers hated it. One of them said it was an insult to teachers, which was a bit...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which was a bit extreme. But so then I had to rewrite the whole assignment with clean, nice paper. But, so when I finished school, I moved to Melbourne and stuff to study animation at Quantum, which is it's Quantum and SAE. SAE does film and media, and Quantum at the time did animation and game design and a few other things. And then that wasn't for me. And so then through my 20s, I did a bunch of other stuff, lived overseas and stuff, and just kind of lived in Melbourne and just enjoyed life. And then when after living overseas, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I came back to Tasmanian, was like, hey, art school. So I was like, I'll go do illustration at art school and try to do books or whatever, which I still want to do. I still want to do children's books. But then my first semester, I chose ceramics kind of as I saw it as an option. I was like, ooh, that's going to be a nice, fun subject, but also kind of a blood subject. So just a nice, relaxing, take it easy kind of class. But then I fell in love with it. And so that since then, it's kind of been my life ever since. So my whole life since 2016 has kind of been ceramics focused.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So many artists I meet who went to art school thinking they were going to do one thing and then actually finding they do something else.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting thing. So what was that moment like for you? Was it just picking that unit to take, or what was it about ceramics that captivated you?
I never had really done it before. But there was an artist in residence at the time, Kelly Austin, and her artworks, for some reason, just really struck a chord with me. And seeing her work, and then there was an artist also, this next semester, there was an artist in residence called Beardsley. And both of their kind of approaches to ceramics wasn't about function or kind of the view of ceramics I had at the time. And so they had a really different way of interpreting ceramics. And Corey, for instance, used clay and ceramics as the making process, but not the finished piece. So she would use ceramics or clay to make the positive spaces, no negative spaces, whichever one. And then she'd make these big plaster sculptures that would fill in the space between the clay. And then she'd wash all the clay out. Then she'd have these big plaster sculptures.
Oh, wow.
And Kelly had this kind of very kind of minimalistic, but also kind of disciplined execution of craft kind of approach to her work, which I really liked. And so her work's very precise and clean. And I think that was a big takeaway, and that how that has kind of continued to influence my work. Her approach to ceramics and everything. So yeah, it was seeing those two practitioners, I think, that really kind of stuck with me, and it's just a lot of fun. It's messy and it's dirty and it's very hands on, and wheel throwing, for instance, is very meditative, and it's a very calm and kind of collecting process where the world kind of melts away when you do it. And it's very community driven as well, which I really liked. Like it wasn't like this secular thing of you, because when you draw, you're kind of at a desk by yourself. But with ceramics, there was this beautiful, and you saw the old ceramic studio. So there was a whole line of honours and third-year students up against the wall. And there was Sonia Bruff, who was the teacher. And so it was just this beautiful little collective of students. And there was like the strong kind of community vibes within ceramics, which I really like.
Yeah, and that was a really historic space as well, wasn't it? I think it was the largest kiln in the Southern Hemisphere, someone told me.
Yeah, it was one of the largest, I believe it was one of the largest studios. Yeah. Because it used to take up it got a little bit smaller over the years, because TAFE moved in on textiles, moved into the front space, but because TAFE used it as well, and UTAS, and there was a big postgrad space as well. But yeah, it was a huge, beautiful space. Yeah, and and it was built. My understanding, so I was told by one of your colleagues, there was a very famous professor. Oh yes, Vincent McGrath. Yeah. So Vincent McGrath, he founded the space and he founded the art school at the Stone Building in Inveresk. Yeah. So I think there was plans at the time to close the art school down or something, and he led a big kind of protest and fight, so to speak, against that closing down. And so he led marches down the streets or whatever in Launceston and got national attention. And after that, Vincent McGrath and a group of other artists, David Marsden, Deb Mailer, and a bunch of others, they all kind of got together, and they were the founding teachers, I think, so to speak. And so I was talking to Deb Mailer about one time, and she was talking to me how they walked through the Stone Building when it was still kind of this train shed. And they were plotting out where everything was going to go and everything, which I found amazing. And then I ended up kind of sort of being part of that process with the new building, which was kind of bizarre to kind of a year or so later after having that conversation with her. Yeah. But he was head of school, and because he was head of school, the ceramic department was also kind of the amazing. Yeah.
Look, I've been an academic for 20 years, and that's what tends to happen. Is that those who take the lead, it's what they're most familiar with. But I think what I was, the for listeners, we've just sort of talked about this incredible space that we're both familiar with, and we'll come back to your move and where you are now. But yeah, it was Launceston. Once upon a time, there were trams on the streets. There are no longer, and the art school was based in the old tram shed where they would do all the repairs. And there's these cranes, there's a heritage building, and this foundry in the middle of it. But the important thing for me was when I first saw your work and I met you. So I was talking to Sonia and Troy Ruffles, and what struck me was this was like immediately post-COVID or during the pandemic, but we could come into that space, and it felt like a community space. So that sense of community you got, and then what you've just talked about is how this movement formed locally as well to be able to construct that thing. So what are I guess the key question that comes out of all of that, Travis, is there, is the ceramics community here in Launceston? I'm not familiar with it, but is there one? And what does it look like? There's a lovely community. There's also a few pottery studios around, which is great. There's Glazed Confused, which I used to work at. I left there 2 weeks ago after 3 years there, which was amazing. There's Paint the Town Red. There's Russell Street Studios, formerly known as Tin Shed Studios. There's Artisan Pottery up on the way to Beauty Point. I can't remember it, but it's a beautiful space with Rudolph and Lisa run. I've done wood firings there. They do communal wood firing, so you can become part of it and you bring your potter in, and you're part of this really long firing process overnight. And at the end of the process, when the kiln when Rudolph and Lisa say it's done, they bring out the rum, which was great. And then Neil Hoffman is out near Deloraine somewhere. And then there's a bunch of other potters. There's Tash Bernice. Again, out in near Lagana and stuff. So there's just heaps of potters around. Yeah. And Russell Street Studios is also awesome because they have a big community of potters as well. Glazed and Confused, they have regulars who come in all the time and use the studio. And that's this beautiful community that I've seen kind of form over the last 3 years or so. And those potters are now creating their own little studios at home and installing kilns, and they've started going to the markets and stuff around town. And it's been great just to see them to teach them for the first time 3 years ago when they'd never touched clay, and now see them kind of creating their own little studios 3 or 4 years later. So it's lovely. It's a privilege. It's amazing. Yeah. So there you go, listeners. If you're not in Lonnie, if you're planning to come to Lonnie and you love ceramics, this is the place to be.
Exactly.
But Travis, that's a beautiful segue into an important part of your practice is education. Yes. Yeah. So I graduated in 2020 from UTAS, and then about 6 months later, Glazed and Confused, which was a Hobart-based studio. They were getting a lot of interest in up here and stuff, and Julie founded the business, and they decided to open a studio up here. And so I saw the advertisement in the newspaper, so I started working there, which was amazing. It was a bit nerve-wracking the first time I ever gave a class. I kind of ghosted a few classes, but the first time I gave a class, I sat down to give a lesson, and then my mind just went blank. And I panicked, and I was like, oh, crap. So I quickly jumped out the back and had a glass of water, took a breath, and came out. And there was also some scary Polish women in the class, which just kind of were intimidating. And so then since then, it was great. And then so about 6 months or so later, I got a message through Instagram from Stephen Carson being like, hey, would you like to do some teaching work at the university? And I was like, of course I would. And that was 2 years ago now. And so now I teach ceramics here in Inverest. So I've been teaching there for 2 years. I started off in the old stone building, and over that time we've moved into the new art school space, which is sharing the whole building with architecture and design and a few other disciplines. And then I also now teach a critical practice in art encounters. It's a class that it's one of the core classes of the semester for the first years, and it connects kind of theory and making as a class, which is really great. And then I also, starting last year, I jumped onto the University Connections program in object design, which is where the students get given a theme. Sabine Pagan runs the class. She's great. And so they get given a theme for the year, and then the facilitators / mentors, we pop in every few weeks and kind of give them ideas, see how their project's going, because
They're teachers that the schools themselves look after them mainly, but we just kind of pop in and have conversations. And we mentor them at the end of the year, and then at the end of the year there is a kind of a nice big show featuring all these objects that they've made, which is really cool. And it's really nice being working with grade 11 and 12 students because it's just a different aspect that they have compared to uni and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, going back to my class, that was what, year 10 or something like that. You know, if someone like yourself had come in, I mean, I had a lovely pottery teacher who was and where I come from, very strong tradition in ceramics. Globally recognized ceramicists living like 2 villages away. But the teacher had that connection, but didn't convey it. But I think I would see ceramics so differently if I would not understand it better. So the opportunity for those kids at that age to be able to have, and it wasn't even necessary.
They weren't necessarily doing ceramics. Like a couple of them did, but some of them were making tables or these sculptures or these light works and stuff. And I was just, because I've done graphic design in the past and a little bit of just a bit of everything, and so that kind of just design in general. And my objects are very designed, if that makes sense. Some of them are quite designed. But yeah, so because when I did it last year, I had the Scotch Oakburn cohort, and I looked after the Launceston College cohort as well, and there were different vibes as well, which was really cool. Oakburn is very making focused and very craft focused, so they want to make tables and chairs and these kind of beautiful, crafted objects, and LC also making beautiful, well-crafted objects, but they approach it a bit more kind of artily, which is kind of cool. So there's completely different vibes, but both still wonderful. And then this year I'm doing St. Pat's, which is kind of like a middle ground between those schools. But yeah, so they made a whole range of objects, and you kind of jump in and you try to kind of guide them in some way.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah. Wow, that's a great opportunity. Wonderful.
Yeah, and now some of those students are now at UTAS, and I have taught them in my ceramics class and my other classes, and it's like, hey, I know you from when you were in grade 12 and stuff. And Ash Bird had told me about it before one time, because he used to do UCP back in the day with art. And he once was just because Ash Bird is kind of a mentor of sorts, a best friend, but also a mentor. And he kind of guides me through a lot of art stuff, which is great.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh yeah, so I taught students in high school, and then I've seen them become students at university and then go on to have their practices and stuff. And I'm now getting a little taste of that, and it's kind of special. So,
yeah. I mean, the last time we met, you were, I was getting my tour of the new art school quite recently. And we came into the new ceramic studio, and you were there, and you were firing, is that the right word? Yeah, firing the work for the students at the end of semester, ready for their end of semester installations. Yeah. But the time before that, you were just finishing your honours. I was walking, I think I was just walking the dog or something through campus. And you and a friend were loading up the car, and that was it going. But I think what the interesting thing is your trajectory, and then how now you're seeing the trajectory. You're almost you're offering students that the options by the school. It's like getting that insight that could lead them onto a career in the arts or design or whatever it is they choose, but to do it in a critical, makerly, if that's all right. You said artily, so I can say makerly way. We're just making up words here. But that's a wonderful thing, and so many. I suppose that's what gives me joy as a former academic is all those graduates who've stayed connected and you see where they've got to in the world. It's a
special thing, but it's also very nerve-wracking, because it's like, because that grade 12 is an incredibly important time of these people's lives, and there's all this pressure on them, and they're wanting to go. Like one student last year, he wanted to go to James Curate University to study medicine or something. James Curate, the big medicine school in the mainland, and he needed a certain ATAR/GPA at the end of the year, and he was like, "What can I do to get this?" And it was like this pressure and everything, and then, which was interesting, and you just kind of have to kind of work through it, and you talk to your supervisors and everything for guidance and everything, but it was very, there's a lot of pressure involved, which is okay. It's just figuring out how to kind of get through that.
And that's it, right? Is the skill in what you do in that as a mentor. It's not to say don't do this, do that instead. It's actually to help them to see what choices they have.
Yes. Yeah.
And so look, as I say, I wish I'd had someone I wish there was something like that when I was at school.
Yeah.
Because my life might have worked out slightly differently. Not that it's I've got a great life. I'm a podcast host, for goodness sake.
That's awesome.
Is there a better job in the world? I don't think so. Let's get back to your job, or let's get back to your practice. You used the word. Well, you talked before about those key influences. And you used the word precision. And when I was introducing you to someone on the way into the studio just now, that was the word I used to describe your work. So there's a precision to your work, and but it's really quite unorthodox. Would be another word I would use.
Yeah.
But it's just me and my interpretation. Yeah. So how would you? Because obviously this is we're talking. And I'm sure people have already Googled to see your work. But if you were to describe your work,
that's great. There's always minimalism, and I always it's investigating kind of the meeting points of balance and fragility, definitely, where I play with the expectation around ceramic as this brittle, fragile. It's still strong, but it is fragile. And to play with that and create those kind of play with the expectations of people, and then also play with how they experience the work and how they kind of walk and experience the space around my work. It's also interesting.
Yep. And
how they change their way of movement, and they slow down and they're careful. But also materiality and worth. And some people, they really like my work and they want it in their home, but they've sometimes been scared about, like, if they have a cat or whatever, and the cat's walking along and whacks my work and then it breaks. So some people have been reticent about getting my work because of the risks involved. They're still stable, let me just say, they are stable, safe works. They do look precarious, and they are balancing in some of the works. I really enjoy you said precision. In a lot of my artist statement, I say the disciplined execution of craft, because that's what it kind of is. And my friends would laugh because in most of my everyday life, I'm definitely not a discipline. Life is kind of chaotic. But when it comes to ceramics, I suddenly become very disciplined all of a sudden. And my work is, and I really enjoy being disciplined in one area of life, and being able to be precise and have that precision where I can kind of create these very sharp lines. The aim is perfection, which I'll never attain, but the aim in itself allows the work to for me to push it as far as I can and as close as I can, which is the goal for some reason. I don't know why. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am trying to. I once had a show. It was called. Oh no, I had an article in the Journal of Australian Ceramics, and it was just about my practice. But I called the title I gave the article was "In the Pursuit of Fine Lines," because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get the crisp, perfect line, and I think it links back to a dysfunctional childhood and everything. Not to get deep and heavy and everything. Not in a family way, just in a we moved heaps. And so the family life was kind of dysfunctional, and I think that kind of impacts my work now in trying to, because ceramics is connected to function and functional wear and kind of the home and domestic life in a lot of ways. And so I think my work in some ways has that connection between dysfunctional past and childhood or growing up. Not in a bad way, just in a dysfunctional way. And now
unstable, I guess.
Yeah,
always on the move.
Yeah. And now my work kind of reflects that by using functional wear to tell stories and using function as sculpture instead of function as use. Does it make sense? Yeah,
it does.
So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Also, just trying to be as precise as possible and trying to get kind of these beautiful objects that don't look machined but could possibly be machined. and there's always the risk of it taking the warmth out of the pieces. Because I know a lot of potters enjoy the fact that you can see the hand in the work, and I'm okay if you can't see the hand in the work, but I'm still not against mistakes or little bits of imperfection, because then that sort of shows the hand in the work. It's a conundrum, but yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. I suppose so many questions, and I like, there was one really good one and it's gone because I just thought of another one. But it's as an engineer, someone coming from an engineering background, being taught in high precision aircraft manufacturing aircraft components. But there is still the human connection to the materials, and I've got back to that really good question.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
It's much more interesting talking about engineering, but it's you talked before about it being quite meditative.
Yeah.
So, and the way you've just described the work that you do, it's almost like it takes you to a different space, and that is that's. So for you, it's a juxtaposition. There's a juxtaposition between every day and what you're doing in the space. And you did say to me before about how you're making. Sorry, I've made an interpretation.
There you go. Yeah, that's fine.
And listeners, Travis is just looking at me like, "What the heck?"
No.
You tell us. Tell us. I mean, I think you said it quite eloquently. I interpret juxtaposition, but perhaps it's not a juxtaposition, but it's a space in which you can go into and do, and you're not going to achieve that aim, but it's where you can strive for that aim, perhaps.
Like the meditative state, that's kind of not a default, but it's when you're wheel throwing, it is just kind of a state you go into, because it's all about touch and feel and being very, very present in the moment. It was what my honours paper was all about.
I need to read that.
It was about connections between Buddhism and meditation, and ceramics and wheel throwing specifically, and how you enter these meditative states, and how they're mirrored in kind of Buddhism and everything. But no. So when you sit at the wheel, you have to prep everything. Your tools ready, your water ready, your clay ready to go. You throw it down on the wheel, and people always. The first thing you do when you throw is that you've thrown the piece of clay down on the wheel, and then you have to do a process called centering, which turns that ball of clay that you just thrown on the wheel into a kind of a perfectly symmetrical piece of clay on the wheel that's spinning without any kind of pieces that are off balance or off kilter, so it's all kind of perfectly aligned with the wheel itself.
That's the thing I could never do.
Yeah. And you want to do that so that when you open up the piece, your walls are a nice even thickness, so that when you pull up your walls, they stay nice and even. And people, specifically because I Glazed and Confused over the 3 years, I taught a lot of people, hundreds, which was great. But they would always ask, how do you tell if it's centered? And you'd say, just hug it with your hands. And if your hands move, it tells you that it's off center, which is because it's less sight and more feel. And that's kind of what throwing is in a lot of ways. Me and my friend, we tried blindfolded wheel throwing the other week. So we blindfolded ourselves with aprons and stuff. This was about a month ago or so. With Tamer, and it went great, but it changed but then, and I say that it's not sight, but it's still sight's still involved, because when I was doing it, she was saying that I went from one form, which was really wide, and she just said I repeated the same thing a bunch of times, trying to pull up the walls and stuff. So, and losing sight just kind of completely changed the whole sense of throwing. But yeah, because you sit on the wheel. And because it is so touch-focused and feel-focused, and you kind of have to listen to the clay through touch, it does put you into kind of a meditative state, which is quite nice. And so, like, I've found in the past when I listen to music, I have to make sure that the music is kind of nice and leveled music. It can't be too slow, and it can't be, like, really intense music, because then it changes... Well, for me, it changes how I was thinking, and then that would influence my throwing, often not for the better. So if I listen to music, for instance, it has to be kind of nice and level. Could be anything, but it just kind of has to be level music, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense to me. This is an immersive sensory experience, an embodied experience that you have. It's the relationship that you have with the materials, and it comes through touch and feel. And this is what I learned in engineering. So my doctoral thesis is all about that stuff.
Okay, cool.
But with large-scale machine tools that will make like pieces for aircraft engines. And I could be chatting away with the guys who were manning the machines while it was running for, it would run for 10 hours on its own once they programmed it. But they have to stay there, because what if a drill breaks? What if, and they're listening the whole time. They and so that sensory, so there's something, so that for me is indicative of a craft. And so there's that's the crafts personship. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, I come from an age when you said craftsman and anyway.
No, yeah.
Stop, Tim. We're going to edit that bit out. No, Travis, look, but yours is very much an artistic practice, and this is where the conceptual, so that aim that you have, it's the meaning of that. So what interests me about ceramics, I think, having spoken to Madeline Thornton-Smith on a previous episode, who talked about distinctions between high and low art, and how pottery would not be seen, would be seen very differently by certain members of the arts community. And so, how do we, I'm not going to ask you how we break those distinctions. That was more of a, just me musing. But I think it's, what I'm really trying to get to is there's it's really simple, actually. To me, it seems like there's arts and craft coming together in what you do.
Yeah.
How do you separate those out? How do you see them coming together? I'm putting my hands together for listeners, and Travis is just looking at me, waiting to respond. So I'm just going to stop talking. Travis, how do you balance that?
My understanding is in Japan, for instance, they have a very rich and long pottery traditions, and also just folk art in general. And it's really beautiful because they don't have a separation between kind of these higher forms and lower forms, and so they see like folk arts and crafts as on the same level. So they also have this beautiful thing. It's called they give an award to people, and it's called like the national treasure. You're seen as a national treasure or something based on the art you make and the craft you do, which I thought was really cool. But they appreciate, and specifically the pottery and ceramics, they would appreciate the bowl in the same way that they would appreciate the sculpture. For me, I don't in any way see pottery as lower form. But I see it as there are a lot of traditions in pottery. It's very tradition based, and it's very focused towards use, I think, in a lot of ways. And that exploring that, I still create functional wear, and I create sculptural wear and functional wear, and I enjoy creating functional wear, but it's that whole thing. You have to create work that puts bread on the table and create work that makes your soul sing, kind of thing. So it's creating both. And ceramics is really great for that. Ceramics / pottery is really great for that, because you can create more art, sculpturally minded pieces, but you can then also create work that you can sell or sell as functional wear. And you can kind of get a nice balance between, and it's great for artists and potters who are starting off, because they do have that option of creating both. But no, in my own practice, I guess I use things that are more pottery and function, and I use that in my sculptures in a way to try to tell stories and kind of explore the ideas I want to explore. But I don't. Yeah, I don't. And I've been trying to tackle with it for years, the meeting point between pottery and more ceramics. Some probably think there's no difference at all, but for me, there's always been a difference between ceramics, which I find is a bit more broad and all-encompassing, where I think pottery has traditions and expectations connected to it, which I don't know if I necessarily want to explore myself.
No. And look, thanks for that, because I think that's a really keen insight, because today few of us see those distinctions. Madeline in the episodes previously had actually traced it back to the Renaissance period and said very clearly, this is it's the Western arts tradition. It's that sets up these false dichotomies, so to speak. And so it's so the interesting thing for me is everything you've talked about so far. How your own experiences and then passing on your knowledge to others, and and it being such an immersive experience when you are practicing, that actually there's this individual and communal ethos that underpins all of this work that you do, that actually makes all those false dichotomies and ideas that are of a different time dissolve away, I suppose. But also you did talk about Buddhism or point to it. So your influences would perhaps is there a spiritual dimension to what you do?
The practice itself, I feel, is spiritual, because it grounds you in a lot of ways, and the material itself is. It sounds a little bit wanky, but it's a very soulful material. Like, it's very, your hands are in it, you're feeling it, you're moving it, and it's reacting to your input by you use your hands and stuff. And you become very aware of your body and what your body's doing and where it needs to be when it needs to be there, and how little movements in the clay and everything you can feel. And so I feel it's very spiritual in that way. I just think by being a meditative practice in itself, it becomes very, very spiritual, and you connect to yourself in it. I don't know if that's the same for painting and other art forms, because for instance, when I illustrate, I don't know if that's a very meditative process. It's a very thoughtful process, because I'm just there sketching away, and I'm just thinking about everything. But with ceramics, it's a little bit different, because you have to be very present. You can't kind of zone out. Some potters might, I'm not sure. But for me, I can't really zone out. But also, just backing up to something you were saying about just before, about the appreciation between ceramics and art, or high art and low art. One of the beauties of Glazed Confused, and for those that don't, Glazed Confused is a little pottery studio in Launceston, Hobart, where they do classes. Great place to go. But the difference between Glazed Confused and the art school is, the art school, you get people who are part of a very structured education process. But at Glazed Confused, you get all members of society, which changes it a little bit. So you get people from more socioeconomic backgrounds, you get kids, you get older people, you get younger people, you get middle-aged people. So you get the entire kind of community of people. You get the whole range, which is really beautiful. And so they all get to experience ceramics. And then one of the beautiful things is that you then see how their appreciations for ceramics change, and how they've joked and talked about at the end of classes how, like, with Target wear and stuff from Kmart and stuff, or they were like, towards those things. But then when they've also talked about craftspeople at markets and artists at markets, when they have their wares for sale, like at Niche or at Avondale Market or any of the other nice markets around Launceston, how then their relationship between the product or the work that person's selling changes because they've experienced it themselves, which is a really beautiful thing to see. And because it improved, it kind of,
Yeah, and that's something for me is as I alluded to before, and I've talked about in previous episodes. My own background is it's like I come from a family that wouldn't have ever felt part of the arts, and so ceramics is, and we were talking to someone before about, where can I come and do that? Yeah. And so not a paid promotion, but Glazed and Confused. No. But it's, I think it is this thing of accessibility, and how do you, it seems to be something that can invite people in to play, and but then by having that embodied experience, as you've just so well described, they've got some knowledge. They hold that knowledge in their body, and they take that into the world, and it helps them to make distinctions, as you say, between the things that are made by machines and cost very little, and those things that actually embody the person who's made them, that's a conundrum that Connect, Curate, Create. That's why Connect, Curate, Create exists. Is to try to unravel that conundrum and make art available to everyone, and for people to understand artist practices. So that's what this podcast is about. Now, I suppose there was. This is where I, again, have gone off on a tangent. I'm going to cut this bit. There was something I wanted to come back to.
The stuff I was saying before.
Oh, I know what it is. Yeah. So earlier you were talking about there's sort of two aspects, two sides of your practice. There's the stuff that you make that people will buy, and then there's the more conceptual work that you used some great terms there. One was sculpture wear,
and functional wear,
So I mean, I think that's clear to us all what the distinction is, but what's the balance between the two? How much time do you spend on each?
Great question. I would not. I enjoy making, but I wouldn't say I'm a prolific maker. I make functional wear, but I wouldn't say I'm a production potter. I don't make the exact same form 20 times or 100 times or 1,000 times. I make the one form one time. If I make a series of cups, they are a series of cups. They're not the same cup made a bunch of times. They're all kind of vaguely the same size and everything, but they all are their own cup. And I enjoy, because when I throw, it's an intuitive process for me, and it has to be for me to enjoy it. If it's structured and if I was making the same thing every single time, it would lose this enjoyment. So when if I throw the ball of clay down the wheel and then after I center it, I decide what it's going to be. I don't decide before. That's with functional wear. With art, it's a little bit differently. If I have an idea of the type of form I want to make, if I want to make it a balancing piece, or if I want to make it a stacked piece or whatever, I'm currently kind of exploring the idea of locking ceramic thrown pieces inside other ceramic pieces. It's kind of hard to explain. But so that would impact certain aspects because the shape that you center determines the form that you can make. So if you center a larger, wider piece of clay, it's going to be a larger, wider piece. Like it could be a bowl or a dish or whatever. Or if you center a skinnier piece on the wheel, it's going to be more of a cylinder or a cup or a very skinny based bowl. So throwing for me is intuitive. So I decide after I throw it down on the wheel what it's going to be, what form it's going to take, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. And because of that, my ceramic forms are always a little bit different. But the balance between the sculpture and stuff is Sometimes it is, what's the word? Just needs based. If I make functional ware, I get paid sooner. It is just a thing of life that we have to survive. So functional ware generally sells faster, or it gets bought wholesale, and because of that, I'm able to pay bills, etc.
Yeah.
The mindset also to make functional, I find, is a lot more gentle. There's a lot less pressure on me when I make that I put on myself. When I make functional ware, it is more of an easy-minded process. When I make more of my more art-focused sculptural pieces, because I'm trying to say something, or because I'm trying to say something more specific, or explore a certain idea, the pressure and the ideas behind what I make have to be more well informed and more well thought out, and that just it makes making of sculptural pieces a lot slower process and less prolific.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's clear to me. I understand entirely what you're saying. Yeah, and yet. And but the wonderful thing about what you just described there with the functional work is every piece is still unique.
Yes, yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I still care about all my functional pieces and everything.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know what's the word. It's not more simple, because I feel like that downplays it. But there's a word that I can't find. But it is a easier-minded process. I think that's the best word.
Well, you're not pushing your own boundaries with it. You're not, like with what you described to me before was that with your sculptural work, you're trying to do something you've not done before. Your functional work isn't necessarily doing that, I would assume.
Yeah. Like yesterday, for this idea of these locked-in vessels, the idea is to throw one vessel one day, and then the next day I throw another vessel. But then while I've thrown, while I throw that vessel, the other vessel gets placed on top or inside the second vessel, and then I change that second vessel in a way that locks the first form inside the second form. Yeah. Does that sort of make sense?
It does. Yeah, I love Lego. So
okay, cool. Yeah.
So I get what you're talking about.
Yeah, the idea is so that when they're fully fired, they're two separate pieces, but one's locked inside the other.
Almost like a ship in a bowl.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
So just but that process involves creating tall, slender pieces that then open up at the top, which is also what a candlestick holder would create. So yesterday, when I make functional ware, that can also work as practice or exploration of the process itself, that then influences and allows me to have the knowledge that influences my sculptural pieces, the making of those sculptural pieces. So that same process that goes behind the candlestick making is the process that I would currently using in the making of the locked pieces. So they're still connected, which is really lovely. And it's always good to have practice. And functional ware, it's always, because you're making a larger number of pieces, it just keeps you getting practice and keeps you informed about your own methods. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's I wonder whether, like the sculptural ware that you're exploring now, that will become embedded into your practice to the point where that will one day be the functional ware. And when you've moved on to exploring new forms.
Yeah, because I started off making sculptural ware art, and that's what I stuck with. And at uni, I'd always say, I was like, I never want to do functional ware or become a production potter and sell functional ware. And then now I do it, which is fine, and I love it now. But yeah, and so that my original sculptural ware, which is the first thing I ever did with pottery for those first 4 years of making mainly, that those same aesthetics of precision and the fine lines and everything, that when I started making functional ware, that functional ware then took on the same aspects of precision and fine lines as my sculptural ware.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. There's something I didn't really ask you I didn't follow up on something you said before about how your work, you want people to experience it as part of a space or move around it. And I remember a crit at uni, and you were in your honours year, and my memory of it was that you installed some work, and there was water in the
correct.
pieces. Yeah. And so would that be about the functionality of it, or would it be more? What was that about?
The pieces that I had water involved, because during my honours I was exploring Buddhism and the arts and meditative processes attached to Buddhism, and so that led me to mandalas. So for the pieces that involved water that I had, the idea that they were these kind of pottery mandalas of sorts. So I had these big bowls that were full of water, and then and the bowl itself was fully fired and everything. But then I threw off to the side, I had these wheel-thrown forms that were fully enclosed, and they were marbled clay, so they were 3 types of clay pressed together and then thrown into these spheres. And those spheres were fully enclosed and hollow, and so they would float on the water.
Yes.
But because they were unfired, they would start disintegrating as they floated on the water. And so eventually you'd get this, and eventually they would collapse to the bottom, and you'd get this kind of mandala. It was my interpretation of a mandala. And so that clay would scatter onto the bottom, and then eventually the form itself would get a hole, and that would fall. But you'd always have these beautiful spirals at the top and bottoms of your spheres, and they themselves would then settle on the bottom, and you'd get this series of spirals of clay on the bottom of the bowls of water, which was really cool. Yeah. So that was just my interpretation of a mandala.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I mean, I asked that question very purposely in that, in terms of what you've just, how considered your practice is. So whether you're making sculptural work or functional work, really there isn't, it's just a different part of your practice.
Correct.
And none of it is any less meaningful than the other.
Yes. And
everything is so deeply considered. Yeah.
I suppose so. Thank you for saying so. I get it. I definitely... It has, for certain forms, for sculptural and everything, and because of the way I want my sculpture works to balance and everything, certain considerations, like for the pieces that balance on their bottom corner, you have to make sure there's enough weight in the bum of the piece to be able to hold that balance and those kind of things. And then I don't want there to be any drip marks. I don't want there to be any kind of wonkiness at all. It's just, again, it is that kind of pursuit of perfection with knowing that will never be attainable. But it is just trying to everything come back. I think it always comes back to the disciplined execution of craft, where I want it to be as precise as I possibly can make it. And that's difficult, but it's also awesome because then you're constantly figuring out ways and processes that you can use, and different ways to use tools to kind of allow that to happen as well. Yeah. Which means I'm always pushing myself, which is great, and trying to figure out new ways of exploring ceramics, which is always exciting. Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that you convey more than anything is the love of what you do.
Oh, yes. No, I do. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And hopefully listeners have gotten some joy themselves and are inspired to go out and throw some art, throw some clay themselves. Yeah. I mean, I did go into Glazed Confused about 6 months ago and said, I must come back. And I never did. I know. I asked if I could bring my puppy.
Oh, cool. Okay, nice.
Yeah, and they said, don't know. So anyway, he'd love to get involved.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have the precision. Tell us, Travis, what's next? What's happening? Are you showing work at the moment?
I'm represented by Handmark Gallery down in Hobart. So they have some of my work, also by the amazing shop called Stockton Co, run by Alice and Paul up in St. John Street in Launceston. A beautiful shop that sells a whole range of Tasmanian made wear. They have a very large Japanese art collection, craft selection as well. Beautiful shop. And then there's a little gallery in Melbourne as well that's showing my work. I really want to do postgrad, so that's also on the options. And then I really want to get this children's book off the ground idea that I have going at the moment. So I've started with that, and so hopefully that will happen over the next year or so. And just got to make more. Always got to make more.
Always got to always be making.
Yeah. That's be more prolific.
Yeah,
make
awesome.
more. Yeah.
Oh, look, we didn't even get into the children's book, so maybe that's for when you've published that. Let's get you back on the pod and tell us all about that, because there's obviously so much more to your practice as an artist, it happens on every episode where I come in thinking we're going to talk about one thing, and it just opens up so much. So look, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Where can people, other than through, I'll list all those spaces that where your work is available in the show notes, but social media, can people find you on socials?
Yeah, I've got Instagram at artist_Travis Bell. That's probably the main place to get in contact with me. I don't have a website yet. I should change that. But yeah, my Instagram is probably the main area where you can see what I'm currently working on and making. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Travis.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Connect, Curate, Create. I hope you found inspiration and insights that you can apply to your own creative work. For highlights and links, check out the show notes, and be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast player so you never miss an episode. Tune in next time as I continue to explore life and work in the arts.